Good morning, Delaware. It is great to be back in person in the studio with no snow piled up to prevent us from being here. Good morning, Nicole.
It is a beautiful morning when there is not a level 3 snow emergency.
It sure helps, doesn't it?
Yeah.
Last week was only the third show in 6.5 years that we have missed on the radio. So
Right.
It was a bad storm. I'm glad everybody stayed safe.
Yes.
And it's good to be back. We have Gage Tellis working the board for us. Good morning, Gage.
Good morning, everybody. Happy Friday.
Big thanks to our friends at the library for sponsoring the show, and we're really excited. The format's going to be a little different today. We had recorded an interview with Sara Nisha Adams for last week's show. Couldn't do that one. We'll do it in the second half of the show. But the first half of the show, we are so excited to have on the phone with us our Gregory Christie, who is an author, an illustrator, a multiple award winner for his illustrations for children's books, and who is going to be our guest at the Delaware County District Library tonight and tomorrow. Good morning, Mr. Christie.
Good morning, everyone.
It's so good to have you here on the show. Thank you for joining us so early in the morning. And I know you were doing a presentation for the Dayton Library yesterday. We're delighted to have you here tonight. And man, you have done so much. I mean, I don't know anybody who has won as many awards for your children's work as you have. Your online shop, I just ordered a couple of the prints from your shop because they're so gorgeous. And we're just so excited to have you here today.
Thank you, and thank you for the order.
You are more than welcome. So we tell us a little bit about what you've got planned for us for tonight and tomorrow, and give us a little bit about how you got involved in all of this.
Well, I just love being a children's book illustrator and author. I'm mostly known as an illustrator because when I was very little, I used to draw all the time, and I was that quiet kid that really was, my parents really didn't know. They didn't go to art school, so they just encouraged me by getting me art supplies.
Oh.
And it's a real passion. It was always a passion. It still is. So I like to actually teach the public. And I like to teach people who say, I can't draw a straight line. I like to teach people who are inspired to do art. And tonight, I plan to teach the community, teens and also adults. And we'll do something like book binding. And we'll also do a kind of step-by-step painting session.
Yeah.
That's really exciting.
We've got some really exciting things planned. Both of your workshops are totally full. So if people are listening now, then they can hop on the wait list, but it's full.
Oh, wow.
Yeah,
All right.
but one of the things that we're really excited about is tomorrow at the Orange Branch Library, you are going to be helping out a little bit with our Telling a People's Story exhibition. If people don't know, this exhibition features the works of African-American children's books that have been created in the last 50 years. We've got 33 artists featured in it. You have 6 books that are featured in this particular exhibit, but you also might know some of the other folks who are featured in this exhibit. So you're going to help us do a little gallery walk.
Yes, absolutely. I'm honored to be in the company I'm in, and they're friends and colleagues, and I just would love to have the opportunity to show people things they may not notice, little nuances in colors or composition, or maybe even some background in my own work, how the work came together, how I put it together, what was my thinking, and also just answer questions if anyone has any.
I'm especially excited for that.
Yeah, me too. I can't wait to there's nothing like walking through an artist's exhibit when the art with the artist.
Oh, yeah.
So that's going to be great. In fact, we just lost one of your colleagues, gentleman, Mr.
Ashley Bryan.
Ashley Bryan passed away this week, and I know there's several pieces of his in the exhibit as well.
Yeah, it's been really, and there's also Floyd Cooper and Jerry Pinkney, recently. But Ashley Bryan is, for people who don't know, he was on the beaches of Normandy. He has a life that was amazing, and when you met him, you just could. He was just a treasure, and knowledge, and very unique person, and he was very giving. And as a young illustrator, when I started, he was there to encourage me. And it meant a lot, like the way he was as a person and how he helped me navigate the illustration industry.
That's really wonderful. When you look at your kind of lifetime of an illustrator and studying other people's works, how have you seen the evolution of African-American portrayal in children's literature and art, even, from your childhood and up until what you're contributing to it today?
I would say it's always been the same. I think there's a line going through everything of giving people a dignity, giving the African American culture and community a sense of dignity, and also to tell the story in a way that is honest, but really just has a beauty to it. Because sometimes history is really difficult to know.
Mm-hmm.
Every culture's history, every person that's come here has had different challenges, and African Americans and African descended people, they had a unique situation, and it's just amazing to be able to tell these stories, to have people look at African American history in a different way.
Yeah.
Because when I was growing up, I remember just being a footnote, a short paragraph, and books like Bad News for Outlaws,
Mm-hmm.
which I did on Bass Reeves, first U.S. Marshal, Color United States, or Love to Langston on Langston Hughes, The Champ, Story of Muhammad Ali. These are all stories that just give a human element to people who, you may not have known about.
Right. I love how you mentioned, showing beauty amidst struggle and turmoil. I think one of your most celebrated and your highest awarded books is The Freedom in Congo Square, which is during the time of slavery in New Orleans. Slaves were allowed one day a week that they could go and they could dance in Congo Square, and it was allowed and, in fact, legal. And that story, could seem very dark, but it's told with beauty, and the illustrations are absolutely lovely.
I have to agree about the biographies you've done, because it's such a mix of really well-known people like Langston Hughes and Jackie Robinson and people like that, but also people like Bessie Coleman that people may not have heard of, that are fascinating life stories, but probably haven't been told. And definitely your take on them has added beauty to the history.
Mm-hmm.
Yes. I try to do stories that will make people say, oh, I never knew about that person, or that's interesting. And I try to dig deeper. And what generally happens in the industry is that you get manuscripts sent to you, and you choose to do it.
Mm-hmm.
And I really choose stories that I feel I wish I had when I was a child. So any book that comes to me that I really find interesting, or I know about the history, or even if I don't, that's the books that I will choose to illustrate.
Awesome.
You've also done work, though, in illustrating magazine covers. You've done, but the one that we got both Nicole and my juices flowing was the album covers. Yeah. You started working in a nightclub, doing illustrations in a nightclub, and that led into other things. How did that get started?
Well, going back to my childhood, I was really shy as a child, and I grew up in a small town in New Jersey. And by the time I decided I wanted to go to art school, it was just being thrown into this new world, and I still was pretty shy. So what I started to do was, being in my 20s, I would go out to nightclubs and things like that. And there was one place in particular that was very fancy, and it was called Nell's. It was on 14th Street. And I asked the manager if I could show slides. He said, that's a great idea. No one's ever done that here. And then showing slides turned into, can you actually paint while people are here?
Wow.
And I was at another club, and then it turned out that there was also a record company throwing that party. It was named Giant Step Records. So once you start to get in that circle in your 20s, you end up meeting DJs. DJs introduce you to musicians, and one of my first jobs was that. I actually stopped some musicians leaving the stage, going into the dressing room, just one of them, and luckily was the right one. And he said, wow, you should meet the manager. And then I went back into the backstage, and then the words that really stuck with me was the manager said, when we get signed, you get signed. Because they said they love the idea of doing artwork for an album cover.
Mm-hmm.
And that was
Cool.
for MCA Records.
Wow.
And that led to many commissions and other, because, industries are small, so
Right.
no one knew who this guy is, meaning myself, like who's doing a cover for this group called Justice System, and that led to Joe Sample album covers. and the biggest one was a John Coltrane box set. It was one that people were waiting for decades to come out, and it was released in '97, but it was a 1961 Village Vanguard recording.
Wow!
So I did portraits of Coltrane, and that's my biggest job, I believe.
That's awesome.
So tonight you're going to be doing the what we've been calling just roughly a paint night at our Orange Branch. Then tomorrow morning it'll be the walkthroughs at the gallery, and that starts from
10:30 to noon.
10:30 to noon, and then in the afternoon we're doing the bookbinding workshop. So we are really looking forward to seeing you. Thank you again for calling in this morning. We really do appreciate it. Thank you for everything you've done, and I can't wait to meet you in person. So we'll see you tomorrow. I'll see you tomorrow at the Orange Library, and thanks again, our Gregory Christie, illustrator and all-around mensch. Thanks a lot. We'll see you tomorrow. And we are going to take a break here, and we'll come back with our recorded interview with Sara Nisha Adams, who is the author who is coming. Well, actually, we're going to be doing a Zoom meeting with her on February 22nd at 2 o'clock.
It's a
There's
Tuesday.
Still tickets. Yeah, 222.
Yeah.
And we'll be right back after this break, so don't go away.
Welcome back to the show. We are delighted to have as our guest today, Sara Nisha Adams. Sara is a writer and an editor who lives in London, was born in Hertfordshire to Indian and English parents. Her debut novel, The Reading List, is partly inspired by her grandfather, who lived in Wembley and immediately found a connection with his granddaughter through books. Goodreads says this is an unforgettable and heartwarming debut about how a chance encounter with a list of library books helps forge an unlikely friendship between two very different people in a London suburb. And those two very different people are Mukesh, an 80-year-old widower who is still grieving his deceased wife, and Alicia, a teenager who is working at a rundown public library while caring for her dysfunctional mother. Stephanie Harrison in Bookpage says this is a story about two lonely individuals whose initial common ground is, ironically, that neither has any interest in reading. Welcome to the show, Sara. Thank you for being here.
Thank you so much for having me. It's lovely to be here.
Well, you can imagine that for a librarian like us, like me, and book lovers everywhere, this is like a Valentine reading this book. It's just such a great celebration of reading and what reading can do for people. So tell us a little bit about what the inspiration for the book was and why you wrote this.
I think it's so lovely to hear that it kind of celebrates reading, because that's exactly what I wanted it to do, and especially to celebrate libraries. I really wanted to write a book about the importance of books. The idea came from sort of my own relationship with my own grandfather, my dada, because I used to visit his house and couldn't really speak the language that they spoke there, which was Gujarati, and I would just hide behind a book all the time. I'd tuck myself away in the corner and just read. And he realised that if I was ever going to come out of my shell, he needed to ask me about the books that I was reading. So he would always take the book in his hand, read the title out loud, and then ask me about the book. And I'd talk to him for ages. And they're some of my most cherished memories with him, because I would suddenly start talking about my life too. And I remember the same thing would happen with librarians when I went to the library in the summer and did the reading challenge. I would talk about books for ages, and for a shy child who didn't really know how to talk to people, it was such an important part of my life growing up. And there was a point at which my local library closed down and we didn't have a library for a while, and it just made me feel so sad for so many other young children like me who weren't able to kind of access as many books as possible. It's such an invaluable gift.
So you were the inspiration for Priya then, as well as your grandfather being the inspiration for Mukesh.
Yes, I think so. I always think of myself as a mini Priya, but I think she's a little bit bolder and bolshier than I ever was at that age.
She's a delightful character. I really enjoy reading about her. It's funny because I really got interested in the 8 titles that you selected that comprised the reading list. So can you talk a little bit about how you decided on these books? It's a really diverse list, and it's mostly books from the 20th century, but not all. And the one that isn't from the 20th century gets some pretty interesting reviews. So how did you choose the 8 books?
Yes, they're all books that I have loved mainly when I think I read them all when I was a teenager, at that
Mhm.
point in your life when books leave such a lasting impact on you. And I was discovering books that I'd never read before, books that were so different to anything I'd read before. Quite a lot of the books on the list are actually books recommended to me by one of my English teachers, on his own reading list. I had a couple of English teachers who'd always give me lists of books that they thought I should read beyond the curriculum, because they thought I was looking for something to interest me beyond the books that we were studying at school. And they left a lasting mark on my life, I think. And I feel those books that I read, most of them, I read them in long summer holidays, and I can just remember the experience of reading them, of feeling kind of so excited to get back to them, to leave my school lessons and get home, or to like just wake up in the morning during the holidays and just sit and read all day. So I think because they hold such a special place in my heart, I really wanted to see those books through these characters' eyes. I pretty much wrote the list and then stuck to the list exactly as it was for the book. Kind of had to make sure that it worked because I didn't want to lose any of them.
Well, it seems to work really well. I'm enjoying how you manage to weave the stories from the books into the lives of the people, because I should say it's not just Alicia and Mukesh in the book. There are other people who are influenced by the list, and how this all comes together is what makes the book work so well, I think. Alicia, I think, is an interesting character. She's kind of a disaffected secondary school student who's working reluctantly in this rundown, forgotten public library. She's waiting to go to university, and she's never dreaming about a career in books or libraries. And I got to tell you, that sounds an awful lot like me in the 1970s, to be honest with you. So you really seem to get into Alicia's head. She has. I mentioned the dysfunctional family. How did Alicia come to be in your own mind?
I think Alicia, in lots of ways, other than her lack of interest in books, was a bit like me when I was a
Mhm.
teenager. I think I felt very much like I wasn't quite living the life all my friends were living. And I think while our circumstances are quite different, there are lots of parts of our personality that are similar. And I think the fact that she keeps a lot close to her chest, there are things that go on in her family that she doesn't want to talk about to the outside world, and she keeps it all on her own shoulders and carries the burden herself.
Mhm.
I think that's something that I could really relate to. And I just really wanted to find a way for her to find an escape,
Mhm.
even doing the job that she's doing that she thinks is really boring. And I love the idea of her finding joy in her job and finding joy in a library and finding peace there too. Um, so yeah, I love her as a character. She very much is a kind of spikier teenage Sarah, I think.
She's so reluctant to commit to anything, and but once she commits to books, she seems to have a meaning in her life.
Yeah.
I thought that was just a really interesting approach to things. So, okay, we've introduced the two main characters. So, do you have a bit of the book that you could read to people so that people could get a feel for what this is about?
Yes. So I'm reading a part from probably about halfway through the book where Alicia has just finished reading The Kite Runner and she's about to hand it over to Mr. P or Mukesh. Alicia plonked The Kite Runner on the desk in front of her. Her mind flew back to Hassan and Amir. It felt weird handing it over. She felt possessive, protective over it. But when she looked up at Mr. P's face, now slightly less outraged, she could see the eagerness in his eyes. Look, she said to him, I've got to be straight with you. This is really, really hard to read. Like, not difficult, but it's deep. So, so deep, okay? Okay, he said. I've had deep in my life. I think I can do it. He smiled broadly. She could tell he was waiting for her to ask a question, so he could impart some Atticus wisdom. Like what, Mr. P? She indulged him. Well, his eyes looked up to the ceiling. I wasn't born here, you know. I left my home, Kenya, behind to come here, to raise my children, to bring them opportunities. It was hard settling in, always being different. Well, she said, this book's about moving away from your home. The main character, Amir, he leaves Afghanistan, where he grows up, for America. Really? Mr. P brushed his hand over the cover. I know you'll love it. But trust me, this literally makes Rebecca seem like child's play. Like, that's an awesome book, really atmospheric, but this is like an emotional roller coaster that just keeps going and going and going. Okay, Miss Alicia, he said, I understand you very well. I will read and report back. With almost a skip in his step, he headed towards a seat in the library, and just before he sat down, she said, Don't cry, okay? Yes, boss, he called back. He sat down in his favourite chair next to a little alcove of bookshelves with a tall reading lamp. From here I can see you, Alicia, all the other librarians, Lucy, Benny, and the other young man, he told her once, or that student dumping their books in front of them and pulling out a scraggy notebook, or the young mums and dads reading to their children. I like this spot. It is becoming like a new routine when I read here. These strangers, they're my silent companions. Alicia had been pleased that Mr. P was opening up, little by little, not just to her, but also to the other people who worked here. A few days ago, Lucy had said, That old man you're becoming mates with, he's rather sweet, isn't he? She thought of the first time she was rude to Mr. P and how Aidan, her brother, and Kyle had convinced her to right her wrong, just like Amir had done in The Kite Runner. It was true. It wasn't too late to be a good person. Never. Alicia now felt a strange sense of pride for the old man. She knew that Mr. P was lonely, but he was starting to do things to help himself. He was doing so well.
I love that. I love
Lovely.
It is amazing how these two people who are so different help each other through the medium of books, and so that plays out so much. And it's so funny because it's like, because they don't know each other, the relationship he has with Alicia is so different from the relationship he has with his three daughters.
Yes, absolutely. And I think because he's got a bit of distance with Alicia, he's able to open up to her a little bit more. His three daughters check in on him and do all the things to kind of keep him alive, make sure his food is stocked up, make sure that his house is clean, make sure that he's kind of taking his pills, putting his bins out, but they're not really having conversations with him. I think the books allow Alicia and Mukesh a chance to relate to the characters, but also to relate to each other through those books in a way that they might not if they just met each other on the street or in another context.
In in the piece that you read, you referred to when they first meet. They do not meet cute.
No.
Alicia's pretty miserable, and Mukesh is so out of place. I mean, he's such a fish out of water in the library. So I would love to continue this conversation, and we are going to get to the opportunity to do exactly that on February 22nd at 2:00. The Friends of the Library is sponsoring the Tea for Two on 22. You can find all about that at DelawareLibraryFriends.org. And Sara Nisha Adams, we really have appreciated your time today, and we look forward to speaking to you in more depth about the reading list very soon. So thank you for being here.
Thank you so much, George. It's been a pleasure.
Thanks. And we will see you, like I said, on the 22nd. So, folks, we appreciate you listening. We appreciate Gage, our engineer, as always. Nicole, always a pleasure working with you.
Pleasure.
And we will see you in the stacks.